Hi, my name is Erica Podlowski. I am the Emergency Preparedness Nutrition and Education Coordinator for the St. James Town Community Co-operative. We at the cooperative are shooting a series of educational videos to teach you methods of preserving and also increasing the health benefits of your food. Our first video we shot was all about sprouting and how to use shelf-stable dry goods in order to create your own vegetables at home. Today, we'll be discussing the world of fermentation and using a process called lacto-fermentation in order to preserve your vegetables and fruits. Not sure what this is? No problem. We'll teach you all about it. Come join us. So fermentation is one of the oldest methods of preserving food. It's an easy and accessible way to increase the shelf life, preserve the nutrients, unlock extra health benefits, and also create new flavors in your fresh foods. Food fermentation is basically the process where bacteria, good bacteria, like yeast, break down carbohydrates or sugars in your food in order to create CO2 or carbon dioxide. So fermented foods you may think of include yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, pickles. You may have even heard of kombucha or injera, which is an Ethiopian flatbread. There's a lot of food that uses natural bacteria in order to create these interesting flavors, textures, and preserve the food long term. There are different types of fermentation. So vinegar is fermented with acetic acid. Wine is produced by alcohol fermentation using yeast. And soybeans are fermented by certain types of molds that can come together to ferment a product named tempeh. Lacto-fermentation is what we'll be focusing on today. The term lacto refers to lactic acid, which is a type of acid that's produced when the sugar is broken down in an oxygen-free environment, sometimes referred to as an anaerobic environment. Sauerkraut, yogurt, and kimchi are all examples of lacto-fermentation. Lactobacillus is the name of the good bacteria that we're trying to increase in order to preserve our fruits and vegetables. Lactobacillus is naturally found on our fresh produce, so we want to create an environment that this type of really good bacteria will be able to thrive. The key to fermentation is the environment. So in lacto-fermentation, in order to increase the colonies of lactobacillus, that really good bacteria, we need an anaerobic environment, and we also use salt. So salt is going to inhibit any kind of mold or bad bacteria from growing. And this really allows the lactobacillus an environment that it can thrive in.
What materials do you need in order to start lacto-fermentation at home? Very easy, accessible materials. So first of all, you're going to need to pick which produce you want to use. You can use any kinds of fresh fruits or vegetables that you may have on hand. It's important that your produce is fresh. Produce that is a little bit more close to the spoilage side, don't use these for fermentation. So the next pieces of material that you'll need are your fermenting vessels. So this can be a variety of things. We can use glass jars of any sizes. You can use plastic vessels as well. You just have to make sure that these are food grade so they can hold food for long periods of time. You'll need some kind of weight to encourage that anaerobic or oxygen-free environment so it doesn't float to the top. You can be really creative with this. You can use a glass ramekin or a porcelain ramekin, and it can just fit right inside your jar and help press down any kind of floating vegetables. I also have these silicone muffin tins that I find work really well. They're flexible, so you can put them on top of anything and then allow this to help press down your produce. You can use dried beans or rocks or even water in a Ziploc bag. So the next material that you'll need is salt. The amount of salt we'll talk about in a minute, but it's important to have a ratio of salt that's high enough to determine a safe pH level to encourage lactobacillus to thrive and mold to be prevented. And for most lacto-fermentation preserves, you will use water to create a brine. Not all lacto-fermentations require water, but most will require you to create a brine of salt and water in order to preserve your produce. Let's go through a step-by-step guide as to how to start lacto-fermenting at home. So before we start, we have to make sure that we clean our fermenting equipment. We just want to make sure that our vessels and our weights are washed with hot water and soap and dried very well. Our produce as well, we should clean. This doesn't have to be sanitized in any specific way. We just want to rinse our produce and make sure it's clean and prepared in any way we want in order for it to be preserved. So you may choose to peel some of your produce or chop it or shred it. So next is creating your brine. We can create a large batch brine if we're going to be doing a lot of fermentation. Or if you have access to a kitchen scale at home, you can use the scale in order to determine the amount of salt that you're going to add to your fermentation vessel. So let's go over the large batch brine method. We're going to use about 4 tablespoons of salt to half a gallon or about 2 liters of water. We're going to add a little bit of boiling water first, just to dissolve the salt. So now that our salt is dissolved in the boiling water, we'll just top up the rest of our 2 liters with filtered water or tap water, and our brine is ready to go. So you fill the jar just so easily. We're just going to pour our brine over our veggies, but some vegetables may float to the top. So we want to try and prevent any vegetables from being exposed to air. So this is where you would use your weight. And you're going to use this just to press down your vegetables and make sure they stay completely submerged during the fermentation process. So next, all we have to do is seal our vessel. You want it to be loose enough that when it starts to ferment, the carbon dioxide can release. So now that we've created our ferments, now it's just a waiting game. So we want to store our ferments at room temperature. And I advise you to take something like a roasting pan or a cookie sheet and just put it underneath what you're fermenting. Because sometimes what will happen is when the CO2 is starting to be produced, it will bubble over a little bit and it may leak a little bit on your counter. Then you will take your ferments and you'll store them at room temperature for 2 days up to a week. And after 2 to 3 days, you're going to check on them. You can give them a little taste. If they're too salty, then they usually need a little bit more time to ferment. And really, this can be up to personal taste. So you'll taste as you go along, and once it gets to a texture and a salt level that you enjoy, then your ferment is ready to eat. You should notice some bubbles over the days, and this is a good sign because it tells us that it's active and that the lactobacillus is really doing its work to eat the carbohydrates and the sugars and create the CO2 gas, which we really want to happen. So long-term storage of your ferments, you'll move all of your fermentations to the fridge. If you have access to a cold cellar, you can also use this to store your ferments. And in the colder environment, the lactobacillus will start to slow down a little bit and your vegetables will preserve in this environment for a few months up to a full year. So when doing any type of food experiments at home, it's always good to take proper safety precautions and to be very clean. It's very important to make sure after 2 to 3 days to really watch your ferments. There is a couple things to look out for. So you don't want to see any type of colored mold on your ferments. If you see this, this is a bad sign. It happens. It's definitely happened to me before. It's part of food experimentation. The rule of thumb is if you're not sure, then just throw it out. But I will let you know that there is one type of yeast that could naturally develop on your fermentations. That is completely okay. So I actually have an example here. This yeast is called COM. And COM yeast forms this kind of white murkiness and a little bit of a white webbing on top of the ferments. And it's completely okay. These carrots are still good to eat. You would just skim off the COM yeast before diving in and eating your produce. Okay, so we've prepared some dishes here using some recipes that will be posted in the comment section of the video link and also on the St. James Town Community Co-operative website. So obviously you can just eat your ferments as is. They'll be completely delicious just on their own. You could also add them to salads or any other type of dish that you're creating at home. But we've prepared a few different things to show you some really creative ways that you can use your ferments. So we've made a fermented salsa. And the cool thing about this fermented salsa is it's prepared just like a fresh salsa that you would make at home. But because it has the added lactobacillus added to it, it will last in your fridge for months. We also have made something really delicious here. We've taken some of the sauerkraut or the kimchi mixture that was fermented and we put them into some homemade dumplings. So this dumpling recipe is super easy. It's only flour and water used to make the dough. And lastly, we always have to finish it off with something sweet. So we've made a rice pudding. And on top of the rice pudding, we've added some fermented fruit. So everything looks so colorful and appetizing, and I'm very excited to share with my friend Avery and dig in.
This looks so good, Erica. Thank you.
Thanks, Avery. I'm so happy to enjoy all of these fermented goodness with you.
Yeah.
So if you like this video and the series that we're making for the St. James Town Community Co-operative, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also add any comments if you have anything you want to know or if there's any information that we can provide you with.
And stay tuned for our next videos. We can't wait to share them with you.